It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's Roy Millsy, back with Home Town Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the Commander in front of us on my quest to brew the Magic world. As always, that deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. As always, I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider becoming a member of the channel to get access to all of my videos early, as well as checking out the links down in the description below. Today, we are getting into the first week of Duskmourn, second week of Duskmourn content. Last week was pre-con week. And I'm excited to get through some of these commanders that Duskmourn has for us. Some of them are really fun and are going to be some really fun brews. And I figured I'd start with one that I think is really cool because we get to make that whole white weenies playstyle work. And that's Arabella Abandoned Doll, a Boros artifact creature toy 1/3 that says whenever Arabella attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. This is a really fun ability because it pays you off for having those creatures with power 2 or less, whether you're making tokens or playing a bunch of cheap creatures. I think the ideal way to do this is to make tokens and then protect Arabella so that she can attack, hopefully unblocked, right? Get her unblockable so that she's not in harm's way, as you just put these triggers on there on the stack and deal our damage, and then our opponents have to deal with the rest of the game plan, whether it's tokens attacking or creatures coming in. And there's some other ways we can deal damage, whether it's our creatures coming in, whether it's cards allow us to deal damage when we declare an attack at somebody. I think there's a lot of ways we can take this, including some fun kind of one-card shenanigans that we'll get into at the end. So let's jump out into it. As far as making tokens go, there's a lot of ways to do this. Obviously, we want to do this as many ways as we can so that the tokens are underneath 2 power. And the way it would work, especially if we're attacking, is we would resolve any abilities that make tokens on attack first, and then resolve Arabella so we get the most damage. Elspeth Sun Champion, making 3 every turn feels great. Once that number gets above 10, Arabella's going to become a problem that our opponents really have to deal with. Adeline and Impicall, both very good at making tokens, both interesting and good commanders on their own right. Adeline's making a 1/1 that's attacking every opponent whenever we attack. Adeline doesn't even have to attack. Same thing with an Impicall. Whenever we attack with one or more non-gnome creatures, we put a counter on an Impicall and make a number of 1/1 gnomes that are tapped and attacking, where X is the number of counters on an Impicall. So an Impicall is just going to grow over the course of the game if we can get her down early and just start ramping up. Same thing with Adeline. Get these 1/1s down, start increasing that number for Arabella, and the hope is that we can start ramping up very quickly to deal big damage to our opponents. Goblin Ravelmaster and Legion Warboss are 2 creatures I've always loved, because at the start of every combat you're making a goblin. That goblin has to attack the one that you make, so that can be fun. It can sometimes cause some discomfort the turn it comes down because you lose that 1/1 goblin depending on where it has to attack. But I don't think you mind it because you're going to get that Arabella trigger even bigger. Rabblemaster does get a little bit of a buff for every goblin that's attacking, which can make it kind of a threat to some opponents. And then, of course, we got to play Krenko. If we're playing any number of things, like we have some other cards that make goblins, we want to play Krenko to make more and more goblins and really enjoy our time as we get more and more tokens down and threaten our opponents. Loyal Apprentice is a great one, making a Thopter at the beginning of combat on every one of our turns if we control our commander and that Thopter has flying. This works great for our combo we'll talk about in a little bit on being really useful to potentially take infinite combats and potentially win the game with Arabella as long as we can keep it alive and keep its trigger going. Siege Gang Lieutenant, whenever we get to a combat on our turn, if we control our commander, we make 2 1/1 goblins and they get hasted on a turn. Same thing as Loyal Apprentice. These 2 cards will play very well with the card we'll talk about in a second, potentially taking infinite combats. And then Form a Posse, just making X 1/1 mercenaries that can all tap to grow a creature, but at the end of the day, they're 1/1s, and it's a great rate. 2 or 1 mana, and then X is a great rate to make tokens because, in the early game, sure, you're paying a little bit less and something like Hordling Outburst, which will make you tokens, but on the end game, you can make a ton of tokens this way. We're playing 4th Orlingas, again, 2 power, 2/2 human knights with trample and haste means they're perfect for Arabella chance to become the monarch there. Song of Totentans, great rate just to make a bunch of rats. Then all of our creatures gain haste, so we can pair that well with playing other things on our turn. But again, great rate to get a bunch of tokens, get a big Arabella trigger. Same thing with Temp with Vengeance, great rate to get X1/1 elementals. And then if our opponents want to make them, they can, but that gives us more of them, potentially leading to just a bigger and bigger and bigger Arabella trigger. Well, there's other ways we can get damage in. We're going to do the classic when a creature enters in damage to our opponents, because we kind of have no reason not to. It's what we're trying to do. We're trying to go wide to get Arabella triggers. So why not focus in and really care about these triggered? I tried my best to put in creatures that have this ability that still fulfill Arabella. Obviously, Witty Roastmaster won't, but Molten Gatekeeper and Agate Instigator will. Remember, Agate Instigator does have that chance to come in with the extra, meaning it can turn into that Perforos style effect when it does. We're also playing that Impact Tremors, same ability. Whenever a creature comes in, deals 1 damage to each opponent. But we're adding on 2 enchantments that can be really helpful, because remember, we're not trying to really buff our tokens, right? We need them to be 2 or less for Arabella's effect. So we can use Raid Bombardment and Cavalcaded Calamity to get extra damage. They both say whenever a creature you control with power 1 or less for Cavalcade and 2 or less for Raid Bombardment, it deals 1 damage to the player or planeswalker that creature's attacking, meaning you can really get some chip damage in even before they chump block your 1/1s or whatever. You may potentially get 5 or 6 damage in on an opponent even before they block, and it could be even more. I think these are cards that are going to really allow us to use our tokens for Arabella's effect and then get them in and make them a secondary threat once they actually start attacking our opponents. Now they have to deal with the damage that these 2 types of enchantments could deal to them. So what are some pieces that we're looking to find? Well, I think the big one is Delney, right? Delney Streetwise Lookout from Mirza Karlov Manor says that creatures we control power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. This is going to shut down a lot of chump blocking, hopefully that our opponents are going to do. Yes, if we're playing into token decks, then they'll get to trade and all that. But I think this will shut down a lot of it. And then the key line of text, if an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, it triggers an additional time. This is to double up Arabella's effect and make it really, really hurt our opponents. Not only that, but this will double some things like Goblin Rebel Master or Legion Warboss, or even something like a Nimpakal the first time it goes off. Obviously, once it gets above 2, it won't go off again. But we do have a chance to get some creatures in our library with power 2 or less to get more triggers. But really, in all reality, it's here for Arabella. Selfless Spirit can just protect our board, giving all of our creatures indestructible by sacrificing it. And then it's a 2/1, so it counts for Arabella. We get to play these beautiful one-sided board wipes, since all of our creatures are going to be really small. Dusk says we destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater, and then we can return all creatures with power 2 or less from our graveyard back to our hand with Dawn if we want to. But I like these one-sided board wipes because, sure, we may lose a Adeline or we may lose an Inimpakal in the process, but I think we're happy to do that, to have a bunch of creatures on board, potentially nuke our opponent's boards, and still have a big Arabella trigger that turn. The Battle of Bywater, same thing. Destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. Make a food for each creature you control. A way to gain some life if need be. But Basilisk Collar and Caduceus are where we really start getting into some fun. Remember that on Arabella's ability, that Arabella deals the damage to each opponent, meaning that if we can give it lifelink, we're now netting a lot more life than just Arabella's said. So Basilisk Collar giving it Death Touch and lifelink. Caduceus gives it lifelink, and then if we have 30 or more life, it gets +5/+5 indestructible and prevent all damage to be dealt to this creature. Now this would put Arabella outside of the range for its own ability in something like Delney, but if we can set the board up, this will just literally protect Arabella, and that's the point, right? I think a lot of our triggers of what we want our deck to do revolves around it staying alive, and I think Caduceus is the key. The other key, since Arabella's one that deals with the damage, is Infect. Grafted Exoskeleton feels like a brutal way to potentially end a game, giving Arabella +2/+2 and Infect, and because it's dealing the damage to each opponent, all you need to do is to get to 10 creatures of power 2 or less to potentially nuke the board in one trigger. I know that that's not going to happen very often, but the truth is, you could chip this damage away and really threaten your opponents to do so. Yes, if you equip this Arabella, again, she gets out of the range of her own ability, but I doubt this deck's going to have a hard time getting 10 creatures down and really taking advantage of this. In fact, even if it's not one turn, the opponents now have to deal with this grafted exoskeleton over the course of multiple turns or multiple combats. It's not just the one combat, right? Now Arabella and the exoskeleton are a massive threat. Meekstone feels key here. Creatures with power 3 or greater don't untap during their controller's untap steps. We'll have to make sure that if Arabella's out with Meekstone, we don't soup her up with anything so that she can't untap. But this should hopefully keep our opponents locked down while we continue to do our thing. And then the combo that works with either Loyal Apprentice or Siege King Lieutenant is Breath of Fury. This does actually technically work with both Legion Warboss and Goblin Rabble Master as well, but I'll read the card and we'll kind of talk about how it works. So it says you enchant a creature you control. When the enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player, you sacrifice it and attach Breath of Fury to another creature you control. If you do, you untap all creatures you control, and after this, there's an additional combat phase. In order to make this go to infinite, here's what you need to do. You need to make sure that you can always attach Breath of Fury to a creature that's guaranteed to hit damage to an opponent. Ideally, you want Loyal Apprentice because it's making those Thopters, right, in the air. Remember, it gives them haste, so Breath of Fury can make sure that it attacks this turn. But, this could ideally work with Siege Gang Lieutenant or either of our other Gobos that make Gobos because they all come in with haste. You just have to make sure they actually hit. Otherwise, this Breath of Fury combo will not keep going. What I ideally like, again, from Breath of Fury is those 1/1 Thopters that Loyal Apprentice is making. What you'll have to do with Loyal Apprentice, obviously, because there's no way to get Breath of Fury onto that first Thopter that's made, is you'll have to go through a combat, and then on the next turn, when that Thopter's alive, then you put Breath of Fury on that first Thopter that you had, and then you go to combat, Loyal Apprentice makes the second Thopter, and now you have this combo going. So you do kind of need to make sure you have the creatures around to do it. But if so, we can potentially keep that loop going, potentially infinitely if we needed to. But the key thing there is, then if this is paired with Arabella being unblockable or getting free block if attacks in as well, now you're just chunking your opponent's life total down as we're working towards finishing the game that way. I've said it on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my version 1.0 shot at it, and I think there's a lot of things we can learn in testing. I think all three of the cards on the screen here contribute to the three different things I'm looking at when I'm testing this deck. The first is with Karlach over on the left. How many more extra combat spells should I be running? I do run one or two in the deck. I just didn't show them off here on the presentation. Do we need more? And is Karlach something that can help us, or a card like Karlach that gives us an extra combat each turn? Could that effect really help us? The thing I like about Karlach specifically is it gives all your creatures first strike until end of turn for both those combats, which can help with all of these these tokens that are attacking, so that if someone's trying to just trade their tokens in, Karlach's going to help give them a little bit of strength there. Brotherhood Regalia is a card that represents making Arabella unblockable. We do have a couple ways in the deck, both between equipment, lands that make a creature unblockable. There's a couple ways we have to do it. The question is, do we need more? Do we need more ways to protect Arabella? I think we already have things like Whisper Silk Cloak and Trailblazer's Boots in the deck, but the question is, do we bring more of that in to get her in all the time to make sure that her trigger's completely safe? And then Horn of Valhalla on the right, it's just about, do we need to make more tokens? I've put a pretty good mixed way of making tokens between X spells that make tokens and Hordling Outburst and Dragon Fodder and the classic ways to make goblins that way. But the question is, do we need more of it? Do we need more of it? And if we do, there's other options like Horn of Valhalla, which can also soup up creature if need be. But the truth is just making a bunch of tokens. There's so many ways to do that. So the question is, do we need more of it? Do we have enough of it? But let's get into our playtest. Let's see what we can do with our deck. We're keeping a 3-lander with Breath of Fury, a Nimpakal, Hurling Outburst, and Grafted Exoskeleton. So I just realized now that Breath of Fury could also work with a Nimpakal. No, it can't, because they don't come in with haste, so no, it can't. But hey, 3-lander, we're going to get Arabella on 2, it looks like, and Nimpakal maybe on 3, so we can get it started, and I think this is a great start for this hand. We'll get the mountain down turn 1. Turn 2, we'll get Arabella down, and now we can get potentially a nice attack here on turn 3. Turn 3, get a mountain down, get a Nimpakal down. We'll go to combat, attack with Arabella. We're going to do the Nimpakal trigger first to get our gnome. Now we have 3 creatures, right? with power 2 or less, because an Impa Call is just a 2/3, so that's 3 damage to everybody. We gain 3 life. And then now we have our attacks, right? I'm sure that Arabella can find a safe attack on turn 3. She is a 1/3, so even if somebody has a 1/1, right, I think we can still find a safe attack. Here on turn 4, there's a couple of different options. I love a card like Rabble Rousing because it can, it says whenever one or more creatures you control attack, you make that many 1/1 citizens, meaning you can make all those citizens before Arabella's trigger go off and can get really brutal for our opponents. I could tip my hand in the Exoskeleton here, but I don't think it makes much sense at the moment. I'd kind of like to just do the Hordling Outburst, get the Goblins going, and then move to combat, attack with Arabella again. If I can attack somewhere with an Impa Call, I'll happily do it. We want to keep it alive so we can keep getting gnomes, but this turn we'll get a counter and 2 gnomes. So now an Impa Call's out of the range of Arabella, but that's okay. Now we have 5, 6, potentially 7 if this gnome survived last turn. If it didn't, okay, it's just 6. Again, 6 damage, we gain 6. We're dealing damage in combat this turn. I love a card like Flare of Fortitude here because we can sacrifice a non-token white creature rather than pay its cost. I think we'd happily give up an Impa Call to protect this board if we had to keep Arabella going. We're a mana or 2 off, doing Grafted Skeleton in 1 turn, but I think if we take 1 more turn to get something like Rabble Rousing down, the Exoskeleton's a way to end the game, but also Rabble Rousing is just a way to end the game here by just pushing in damage. We'll go to our next turn. The Minas Tirith will come in untapped. Here's the other thing about Breath of Fury that we could consider. So I have 5 creatures that could attack this turn, right? And Arabella. If I thought I could put the Breath of Fury here and just start attacking, and Impa Call's making me more golems every combat, and we could potentially get a couple really big Arabella triggers. But at the same time, it might be worth, I think, just putting this Rabble Rousing down. I get to hide away 5, so I'm going to look at the top 5 cards. And then I get to exile 1. And then whenever I attack with 1 or more creatures, you make that many citizens. Then if you have 10 or more creatures, you play the card without paying its mana cost. Well, all these cards are pretty great. Talisman will get me towards my mana goal. Gate Creeper is just a card that could deal more damage. I'm kind of thinking about that one. If we were worried about somebody maybe blocking, maybe we take the Path to Exile. Basically what happens here, you just full swing with everything we have because we want to make all the citizens, right? Sorry, this is exiled with this. What's going to happen is I'm going to put the Rabble Rousing trigger on the stack first, then I'm going to put the Impa Call trigger. So I'm making 1, 2. Let's say this gnome, died right on that turn. So we're at 7. An Impa Call's at 4 or 3. So we're making 3 gnomes, right? Then we attack with 1, 2, 7 creatures. So we're making 7 citizens. And now look at it this way. Now, Arabella's trigger is going to finally go off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Remember, an Impa Call is no longer a preference. Or sorry, we would have played the Gate Creeper. So 18. Now everybody's getting knocked for 18. We're gaining 18. And we've done almost 30 damage over the course of 3 turns at just getting this damage off. And now our opponents pretty much can't let us untap, and we have the fortitude to protect the board. Worst case scenario, we would just have to get Arabella back down. But again, this is where I think a deck like this, when you're worried about getting things out quickly, the whole goal of this deck is to try to get these Impa Call, these Hordling Outbursts, even Wildfire Awakening here, which can make 1/1s. You just want to get them down, because remember, they don't have to attack. They just have to be on the battlefield when Arabella is attacking. And I love commanders like this. I really loved an Impa Call in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and I really like Arabella. I think I might give it a shot, because you know me, I love token decks, but I think it's a really fun idea. A 2-lander with Greaves to protect Arabella. War Leader, which can make us token or buff. Raven Barman, Delney, and Selfless Spirit. A great starting hand. All we need is 1 land, and there it is. We'll get the Castle Embereth down in tap turn 1, because we ideally want to play Arabella turn 2. Turn 2, we'll get Arabella down. Now the question becomes, what do we do on turn 3, right? Because I've got 3 mana. I ideally want to get as many creatures as I can on board. I could go Talisman into Selfless Spirit and just try to get the trigger for 2. I could go Delney and get a double trigger for 4. The question is, which better sets up? I think I like Talisman into Selfless Spirit, just to protect Arabella. Attack with Arabella, get a trigger for 2, and we're just setting ourselves up. What I like about this is now we keep Selfless Spirit around as that protection, just in case something happens. Same thing here. Do we go Dollmaker's Shop plus Krenko to get some more tokens? Do we do Greaves and attach in one of those two just to protect Arabella? Do we get Downey down now to get a double trigger? You know, there's a lot of thoughts. Let's see, doubling the trigger now would just be 6. If I go Krenko plus Dollmaker's Shop, that's 5. But it saves me another turn. Or if I go Krenko, or if I go Dollmaker's Shop, or Krenko plus Greaves, again, that's 4. So the question is 6 versus 4. I guess the nice part is that Selfless Spirit's still there to protect the board. I just hate leaving a mana on the table, especially this early in the game where we're trying to set up our tempo, right? At the end of the day, I think that's what matters. I think I'm going to go Dollmaker's Shop into Greaves, and we'll put the Greaves on Arabella. This says whenever one or more creatures attack a player, make a 1/1 white toy, as long as a toy hasn't attacked. The reason I like this is maybe Arabella at somebody, Selfless Spirit at somebody, to potentially get 2 toys. But let's say just at minimum we only get 1 toy. 3 damage, gain 3 life. Still not a bad turn in the grand scheme of things. Turn 5, now we have 5 mana. I think I like Downey plus Krenko's Command to get 2 Gabos. Now we're hitting for 2 triggers of 6, but when we go to combat, I think now we can safely get between Selfless Spirit and Arabella, we should at least get 1 toy. But let's say, again, for the purpose of this, we get 2. Now we get 2 triggers of 8. Now we're chunking people out for 16 this turn. And it's not going to take very long for that to get even worse, right? War Leader, as long as if we drew a land, we could offspring this next turn and get 2 more rabbits. Now that's up to 20, right? You can just start to see how this builds out of hand. Yes, I realize that it's very linear. And at the end of the day, some people love or hate linear decks. But what I like about this so much is that if you have a nice snowbally start, people just have to deal with Arabella or you're bored. And we can try to plan either way. I think I'm playing enough of those protection type spells, but you could bring in more. There's a lot of different ways to protect your board by adding some of your budget for things like Deflecting Squad or playing with that. But I think this deck accomplishes what it wants to do. I would be really intrigued for my own personal thing, proxy up Arabella and an Impicall. My list for an Impicall I did back in LCI, and maybe update it, and then this one, and kind of see how the 2 decks would run by themselves. The other thing that I thought about for Arabella was Arabella feels really good. If you had a Caesar precon that you bought for Fallout, Arabella seems like a slam dunk in that deck, because if you think about it, you now have the chance to kind of effectively double Caesar's ability, right? You get Caesar's actual ability to deal damage, and then Arabella is going to kind of do the same thing, which makes it brutal. I'm excited to put this in my Caesar list and update that one and kind of see if this is another piece like something like an Impicall that can just make more tokens and really hurt our opponents. Let me know, what do you think of Arabella down in the comments section below, and I catch you guys next time.